Have you ever looked into your child's eyes and suddenly realized that something inside their heart was breaking, but they didn't know how to name it? My name is Eleonora. I am a single mother. Always believed I understood my son until one autumn evening when Noah looked at me and said, "Mom, I don't know who I am anymore." This story has no dramatic climax, no tearful breakdowns, only silences, wordless embraces, and a journey to rediscover oneself not alone. If you've ever felt lost within your own home, if you've been waiting for someone to truly listen without judgment, stay with me. That late autumn afternoon, Eleanor pulled over on a small road leading to the sea. The sky was touched with the soft gold of fading sunlight. A breeze drifted inland through the rows of casuarina trees, their leaves beginning to fall. The wind carried the salty scent of the ocean, along with something else, a feeling as if memories were quietly returning from some distant place. Eleanor stepped out of the car and adjusted the wool scarf around her neck. She turned to Noah, her son, now 23, who sat silently in the passenger seat, his gaze lost in the distance. Those eyes had once belonged to a bright, eager child. Now they were calm, shaded with something she hadn't yet fully understood. "We're here," she said softly, almost more to herself than to him. Noah nodded, lips pressed together. He opened the door, stepped out, and pulled with him a small backpack containing his camera, the one he never left behind since he found in art a way to breathe. The seaside cottage appeared just beyond the old trees. It looked worn, but still held on to its old warmth. Years ago, this place was where Eleanor's family spent every summer vacation together. But that was a long time ago. Andrew, her husband, had become too busy to show up, and Noah had left home in his second year of college and slowly drifted out of touch. Eleanor opened the weathered wooden door, letting light spill into the quiet living room. "Still smells the same," she said with a faint smile. Noah nodded, then placed his backpack down in a corner. That night, the small kitchen came alive with soft clinking sounds. Eleanor made rosemary grilled fish, the dish Noah used to love as a child. She didn't say much, just moved with steady hands and peaceful rhythm. Noah sat at the table, carefully adjusting his camera settings. "Do you miss the sea?" Eleanor asked in a quiet voice. Noah looked up, his eyes softened. "Ah, I'm not sure. But I miss what it felt like to be next to you." Eleanor paused, then turned toward him. For a second, she saw Noah small again, the boy who once begged for bedtime stories. But the moment passed, and the quiet weight returned to his face. After dinner, they sat on the long bench outside the cottage, looking out at the ocean. The moon rose late, casting a silver glow across the waves. A long silence lingered between them. It wasn't tense. It was Noah, Eleanor said gently. "Why did you want to come back now?" Noah stayed quiet. The breeze moved through his slightly long hair, carrying with it a very faint sigh. "Could you spend just one evening just listening to me?" His words were soft, but they struck Eleanor's heart like a gentle wave breaking open something inside her. She turned to look at him. In his eyes, she saw something deeply honest, weariness, confusion, and a silent cry for help. Eleanor didn't ask anything else. She only nodded gently. "Tonight, I'm not doing anything but listening to you." Noah looked at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he smiled, his first smile since they arrived. A quiet warmth spread through Eleanor's chest. She didn't know what her son would say, but she knew that right now, what he needed wasn't advice. What he needed was a place still and soft enough to begin, speaking from the heart. And Eleanor, the woman who had once held this family together through long, empty spaces, felt a small door slowly open inside her own heart. This trip, it turned out, wasn't about teaching her son anything. It was about finding each other again. Through a conversation that came later than expected, but not too late. That evening, the seaside house rested in a gentle silence. The wind moved softly through the wooden window frame, making the sheer curtains sway like the slow breath of a memory. Eleanor brewed 2 cups of chamomile tea. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from a quiet intuition about what was about to be said. Noah was sitting on the old sofa, wrapped in a wool coat. When Eleanor placed the tea on the table, his eyes paused on her hands, hands that had cared for him all these years, now gently shaking like they had the first time she became a mother. I used to think, Noah began after a long pause, that if I stayed silent long enough, everything would fix itself. Eleanor didn't respond right away. She simply sat beside him, not too close, not too far. But I realized that silence only makes the distance grow, Noah continued, his voice tight with emotion. There are things I kept from you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I was afraid you'd be disappointed. The wind picked up outside, rattling softly against the old wooden frame. But inside the small room, Noah's words rang clearly. Eleanor placed her hand gently around the cup, as if holding onto its warmth might steady the emotions stirring inside her. I thought you were always strong, Noah said, meeting her eyes. So I thought I had to be too. Strong, capable, well-behaved. But the more I tried to be that way, the more I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Eleanor turned away, her eyes clouded with tears, not because he was blaming her, but because, at last, he had chosen to open his heart. Noah, she whispered, if there's one thing I never wanted, it was to make you feel like you had to be someone else. I've only ever wanted you to be yourself, even if that means being unsure, overwhelmed, or fragile. Noah pressed his lips together and nodded gently, as if finally exhaling after holding his breath for too long. Do you remember the day I moved to this city? He asked. You smiled so brightly and told me, wherever you go, take care of yourself. But you didn't know that first night in the dorm, I cried like a child. Eleanor reached over and placed her hand on his. She didn't say anything. That one touch held everything he needed to hear. I didn't cry because I was scared, Noah said softly. I cried because I finally felt the distance between us and how much I missed you. So far, I feared I'd never be able to tell you what was really on my heart again. Eleanor's voice dropped low. But now you've told me. Noah looked at his mother, his gaze damp and tender. Because I didn't want you to ever sit alone someday, not knowing that I had also been lost. They sat together in silence, the tea long since gone cold. But something warm was slowly returning inside both of them. Nothing magical happened. No answers came to erase the hurt. But that night, in the little seaside house, 2 hearts found the courage to cross the silence and meet in the middle. Eleanor gently squeezed Noah's hand. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a mother who had to be strong all the time. She felt like a mother who was allowed to be vulnerable, to be heard, and to be invited into the quiet world inside her son's heart. And in the stillness between the ocean breeze and the silver moonlight, something had quietly begun to heal. The small living room remained wrapped in the soft glow of a warm yellow light. Gentle rays from the corner lamp cast faint shadows across the pale brown walls, creating the feeling of a blanket draped over one's shoulders. The tea on the table had long gone cold, but Eleanor and Noah had not moved. Words weren't needed. In this moment, their shared presence had become a refuge, a space where Noah could finally take off the hardened mask he had worn for far too long. Mom, did you know? Noah began, hesitating slightly. When I was in the city, I once spent days barely able to leave my room. Eleanor turned to him softly. That sentence made her pause. I didn't tell anyone, Noah said with a weary smile. Each morning I woke up feeling like I had no energy to face the day and asked myself, do I have a reason to go outside today? Then I'd just slip back into silence. Elena gave a small nod, something tightening in her chest. It wasn't because I hated school or my friends, Noah continued. It was because I didn't know what direction my life was taking. The words pierced straight through the heart of a mother. I was always taught to try hard, to do well, to be polite. But the more I tried, the more I felt like a stranger to myself. Eleanor whispered, and you didn't tell me. Because I was afraid, Noah replied quickly. I was afraid you'd worry. You already had so much to carry. The room fell into a quiet rhythm of breathing. Eleanor gently placed her hand over his. Noah, I don't need a perfect son. I just need a truthful one. Noah pressed his lips together and his voice cracked as he said, There were times I thought maybe pulling back from everything would help me breathe easier. Eleanor's heart clenched. All the years spent busy, the days she poured herself into holding together a fragile home, she hadn't seen her son quietly slipping into darkness. I didn't speak up because I didn't have the words. That emptiness, it doesn't have a clear shape. It's just this blur, and the more I fought it, the more lost I felt. Eleanor remained quiet, her tears falling without her noticing. You don't have to name it, Noah, she said softly. You just have to let it breathe. Like right now, like this moment. Noah looked at his mother. His eyes were red, but calmer, less stormy. I was afraid of being weak, he said quietly. Afraid of becoming a burden. Eleanor interrupted gently but firmly. Being my son, you have never been a burden. If you are hurting, I need to know, because that is how I get to be your mother. At that moment, it was as if a small door quietly opened inside Noah's heart. There were no more rehearsed explanations, no more pretending to be okay. He was simply himself, a 23-year-old young man who had lost his way, but was slowly finding the light again, through the warm grip of a mother he had thought was too far away. In the small room in the heart of autumn, there was no judgment, no well-meaning advice, only two souls relearning how to listen to one another. And for Noah, that alone was a worthy beginning. Eleanor poured more tea into her cup, even though the water had long gone cold. She didn't really need another cup. Her hands simply needed something to do, something to keep her from falling apart. Beside her, Noah remained silent, his fingers laced together, rubbing gently as if trying to untangle an invisible knot. Mom, Noah whispered, his voice breaking into the quiet air. There were so many times I picked up the phone, ready to call you. Eleanor turned to him, her heart beating faster. During those moments when I felt completely overwhelmed, I just wanted to pause life and find stillness again. Noah continued, eyes fixed on some distant, shapeless point. I thought, if I call Mom right now, would she understand? Or would she just tell me to try harder, to be stronger? That question stopped Eleanor in her tracks. I've always seen you as strong, Noah said, lowering his head. You raised me on your own, never complained, never broke down. You were always steady. And because of that, I was afraid I'd disappoint you if I ever said I wasn't okay. Eleanor felt a tightness rise in her throat. She had never imagined that her strength could become a barrier. Noah, she said softly, gently squeezing his hand, being strong doesn't mean you're not allowed to feel weak. He remained quiet. I was strong because I had to be, Eleanor went on, her voice low. But I've broken down too. I just didn't want you to see. A tear fell onto the back of Eleanor's hand. She couldn't tell if it was hers or Noah's. Perhaps it belonged to them both. I'm sorry, she whispered, for making you feel like you weren't allowed to hurt or to be tired. Noah began to cry, not with loud sobs, but with the quiet release that comes after holding everything in for far too long. He leaned his head against her shoulder, just like he used to when he had a fever or woke from a nightmare as a child. Eleanor held him tightly, not to keep him from slipping away, but to remind him that no matter how old he was, he could always fall into these arms. Some emotions run so deep they're hard to name, aren't they? Noah asked, voice trembling. Eleanor nodded gently. Yes, but once you speak it aloud, it's no longer a silent wound. In that small room, the ticking of the clock blended with the slow, steady breaths of mother and son. No one tried to erase the pain. No one rushed to fix it. There was only presence, a quiet acknowledgement that we don't need to be perfect to be loved. And for Noah, it was the first time in a very long while that he felt truly light. Night settled in, casting soft shadows across the old wooden walls of the small hillside house. The wind from the valley carried the chill of October, gently rattling the glass windows. In the living room, warm light spilled from a corner lamp, filling the space with a familiar and cozy glow. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, quietly drying the teacups again, even though they were already clean. After the conversation with Noah, a part of her felt lighter, but also unsteady. No one teaches you how to be a mother in moments like this. How do you tell your child, you don't have to be strong for me? I just want you to be real with yourself. Soft footsteps echoed behind her. Now, Eleanor turned around. Noah had changed into his pajamas, his hair still tousled from a recent shower. His eyes held a gentle hesitation. I was planning to go to bed early, he said, looking down at his feet, but for some reason, I feel like I can't breathe. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She simply motioned for him to come sit on the sofa. Sometimes silence can be a way of breathing too, she said, her voice as light as a breeze. They sat next to each other, not touching, but the distance between them felt wrapped in a thin layer of warmth. Mom, Noah began softly, I don't expect you to have all the answers. I just need you to listen, and that's enough. Eleanor turned to look at her 23-year-old son, the same boy who just a few years ago insisted on bringing his stuffed bear on every trip. Now, he was a young man, carrying wounds and questions about who he was, and he had chosen his mother to share them with. Eleanor didn't need to think twice. She reached out, pulled Noah close, and held him tightly, a hug with no words, no conditions, no goals. Just the embrace of a mother for a child who needed somewhere to lean. Noah said nothing more. He rested his head on her shoulder, and his breathing slowly began to settle. You're allowed to be tired, Eleanor whispered. You're allowed to feel like everything is a mess, and I'll still be here. You don't have to understand everything. You just need to know this. No one has to go through nights like these alone. Noah hugged her tighter. Mom, he whispered, I wish I'd said something sooner. Eleanor smiled through her tears. It's okay, now is not too late. Outside, the breeze rustled the last leaves of the season, but inside that room, hearts had begun to warm again. They didn't need advice. They didn't need solutions. They only needed to sit beside each other and know that there was a place where they could simply be themselves without judgment, without demands, and without fear of being left behind. The next morning, gentle sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a soft golden hue across the dining table, warm like honey. Eleanor woke up early, but not out of habit. She hadn't slept deeply after the night before, still carrying the lingering warmth of Noah's comforting, genuine embrace. Though her heart had not fully settled, she felt something had shifted, as if a layer of dust covering the years between them had finally been wiped away. Just as she placed the kettle on the stove, Noah walked in, his hair slightly tousled and wearing a pale gray t-shirt. Good morning, Mom. Eleanor turned around, surprised to see that Noah was the first one in the kitchen. Good morning, sweetheart. You look more rested today, she said with a small smile, her voice still tinged with hesitation. I actually slept, Noah shrugged lightly, then reached into the fridge for bread and eggs. I'll cook breakfast today. Eleanor paused. It had been a long time since she'd seen her son take initiative like that. Not out of obligation, but simply from a desire to share. She quietly sat down, watching Noah move around the kitchen with a familiar clumsiness. I'm not sure I'm completely okay yet, Mom, Noah said slowly as he fried the eggs, but at least now I know I'm not alone. Eleanor tightened her grip around her ceramic cup. A simple sentence, yet it filled her heart with the warmth that words could hardly describe. The plates were set, nothing fancy, just toast, sunny side up eggs, and a few slices of fruit. But to Eleanor, it felt like a breakfast made of love. They ate in silence, not out of discomfort, but because there was nothing more they needed to say. They were learning how to be present with one another again, without expectations, without rushing. After the meal, Noah got up to wash the dishes while Eleanor stepped out onto the porch. The trees in front of the house were shedding their leaves, painting a peaceful autumn scene. When Noah joined her outside, Eleanor turned and asked, would you like to take a walk today? Just around the hill to breathe in some fresh air. Noah thought for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I think I need that. Eleanor smiled. She knew that while sadness and wounds don't disappear overnight, as long as they keep walking together, tomorrow could always be different. That afternoon, as the sunlight tilted gently over the hills covered in golden leaves, Eleanor and Noah walked along the dirt path near the house. The same path they used to stroll when he was a curious child full of questions. The air was calm, carrying the faint scent of decaying wood and dried herbs. They walked slowly, and from time to time, the only sound was the crisp rustle of dry leaves beneath their feet. I remember you used to tell fairy tales along this path, Noah said, his voice drifting with the breeze. Eleanor smiled softly. I remember you always asked, why doesn't the princess save herself instead of waiting for a prince? Noah let out a quiet laugh because I didn't believe anyone would come save someone who didn't want to stand up on their own. They walked in silence for a while, then Noah spoke slowly. I think it's time I told you a few things I never have. Eleanor turned to him and gave a gentle nod. I'm here, always. Noah took a deep breath. The truth is, I don't like the field I'm studying. I chose it for Dad, and because I thought you'd be proud. She didn't interrupt, she just listened quietly. I want to do something more creative, more human. I've kept it from you because I was afraid I'd disappoint you, afraid you'd think I was giving up halfway. Eleanor stopped, placing her hand on his shoulder. Noah, the only thing I've ever wished for you is to live true to yourself. Whether you're strong or uncertain, successful or lost, I'll love you just the same. His voice wavered. I also felt pressure, being your son, someone who always seemed calm, steady, capable of everything. Eleanor was taken aback for a moment, then softened. But, the one thing I never managed to do was admit I was tired. You just did that, and that's braver than any diploma. Noah lowered his head, eyes shimmering. They stopped beneath a chestnut tree, shedding its leaves. Patches of sunlight filtered through the branches and fell gently across his dark hair. Mom, if one day I choose a different path, one that's not what you pictured for me, will you still be there? Eleanor squeezed his hand, her brown eyes shining with calm and emotion. I'll always be there, not just at the finish line, but at every step you take. That sentence felt like acceptance, a hug in the form of words. Noah didn't say anything more. He simply looked up at the sky, now turning a deep shade of burnt orange. His gaze lightened, as if a heavy stone he'd carried for far too long had finally been set down. On a quiet weekend morning, Eleanor woke earlier than usual. Gentle sunlight slipped through the white curtains, casting a warm honey-colored glow across the small kitchen. By the side of the old teapot that had been with her for many years, she found a neatly folded piece of paper placed under her favorite teacup. The handwriting was familiar. It was Noah's. To Mom, for me, I don't know how to say this properly, but I believe some things need to be written down so they can last forever. Thank you, Mom. Not for teaching me how to be strong, but for being the only place where I felt safe enough to be weak. Thank you for that night when you said nothing, just sat beside me in silence, for letting me cry without asking why, for holding me the way you used to when I was small, with no reason, no conditions. I used to think you'd only be proud of me if I succeeded, but now I know you love me not for what I achieve, but simply because I'm me. Wherever I go, whatever I do, however many times I fall, as long as I know you're there, I'll have the courage to rise again. Your son, Noah. Eleanor set the letter down, unable to hold back her tears. But this time, those tears didn't come from sadness. They came from gratitude, from peace. Because after all the silence, all the sleepless nights, all the moments she doubted how to be a mother the right way, in the end, she and Noah had found their way back to each other, not just as mother and son, but as two souls who understood, who had grown together in a love without conditions. That kind of love doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need grand declarations. Sometimes all it takes is sitting together in the dark, a small letter beneath a teacup, and a simple sentence. I love you just because you are you. Are you holding on to something you haven't been able to say out loud? Is there someone you love deeply but have never truly expressed it in words? Feel free to share your feelings in the comments below. Sometimes, just a single sentence from you could be enough to warm the heart of someone silently hurting. And if you believe in the power of understanding, of listening, and of family connection, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. so we can continue this healing journey together.